Okay, so let us start again on the second session on advanced system security and digital forensics. So, in the first session, we were discussing about a redress of software failure, in which we were discussing what role does quality play in various legal disputes and what should be done when software failures are discovered. So, let us continue from there and let us start a session again on advanced system security and digital forensics. Please write your details in the chat box. Let us write your details in the chat box. Yeah. So let us start again from the redress for software failures. So going further, we'll see what are the redress for software failures as if the software failure is considered. So now let us proceed further and discuss. So as we know that software is a product. When we say a software is a product, it is built with certain things in mind, right? So when we say a software is a product, it is built with a purpose and the audience in mind, and it is purchased by a consumer with an intended use in an expected context, right? So it is at the end the consumer who is doing a purchase, and the consumer has some expectation level of quality and function. So he may expect that it will be derived in certain quality and certain function. In that sense, buying software is like buying a radio. If you buy a faulty radio, what you do? You have certain legal rights relating to your purchase, and you can enforce them in court if necessary. You may have three reactions. If you find there is something wrong after you purchase a radio, you want your money back. You want a different, not faulty radio, but you want someone to fix your radio. With software, you have these three possibilities also, and we consider each one after the another. First one, to consider the alternatives what you have when you found out any software failure. Uh, we must first investigate the nature of the faulty code. Why was the software bad? One possibility where the software can be bad, or one reason where the software can be bad, is it was presented in a defective medium. Okay, so for example, the CD may have a flaw, and you could not load the software correctly on the computer. And in this case, almost any merchant will exchange the faulty copy because there was some problem with the CD. CD itself did not run, and obviously anyone will exchange the faulty copy with a new one with little argument. So he will argue initially. If you go back and say that this CD is not working in which the software you have purchased, so then there will be an argument, but then a person will actually replace you. The second possibility, that the software did not work because the software worked properly, but you did not like it when you try it out. So when you tried, you did not like, and because you did not like, uh, what you can do? So if you when you try it, you did not like it, and then you may not do all it was supposed to do. So or you don't like the look and feel, or you find that the software is very slow, or it is making your system slow, or you're not satisfied with the software. So bottom line is that there are some attributes of the software that disappoints you, and you do not want the software. Now in this case, the possibilities that the software malfunctions, you cannot use it for a computer. So what you want here is you do not want the software and you want it to return it. So you can say I want a refund. So if the item were a radio, you would have the opportunity to look at it and listen to it in the shop to check its sound quality. You could have checked, measure its size, and also inspect if it had flaws. But do you have the same opportunity when the software program is concerned? No. Probably answer is no. You do not have any options when the software is concerned. So inspection often could not occur in the store. Store tends to deny, or on your bringing on your own computer, then you open your software, install your software on your machine, and then checking the features. With most of the shopkeeper do not allow. Even if you would have tried the software in the store, you may have not have been able to access how it works with the other application with which it must have interface. So you take that software home, you check that software at the home, and then you find out there is a flaw. So only to find that it is free from flaw does not fit your needs. You are entitled to reasonable period to inspect the software. You require some time to work with the software and then decide how the software works. So if you decide within a reasonable short period of time that the product is not for you, you can obtain a refund. But then if after a long time, if you are not interested and if you find that the software is of no use, or there are a lot of flaws in the software, what you should do? Where you should report the software flaws. So when reporting the software flaw, who should publicize the flaw? the user or the manufacturer. A user might want the recognition of finding a flaw. Delaying the release might let someone else get that credit. So it might be possible that there might be a flaw, and then you want to release that flaw. You might to say the entire world that the software is having a flaw, and you want to gain some money from the other person. That delaying that release will give you some credit. But then a manufacturer might want to ignore such a problem or fail to credit the users, and either could say that the other was wrong. So how should the flaw be reported? So there are different viewpoint exists. So whenever certain problem arises, you have certain viewpoint exists, and this viewpoint can be based on the vendor's interest or it can be based on the user's interest. So what needs to be done whenever you're reporting any software failure? So in this case, when we're speaking about the redress for software failure, we have seen that whenever you purchase any software, you have various problems inside. So we have discussed that initially the CD or the media was not correct, but in this case, the person on the other side will argue and return with the CD. But then what if tomorrow you did not like the look and feel, and tomorrow you are not happy with the software in which it performs, and it is not as per your expectation? So in that case, you may ask for a refund. So then under certain conditions, uh, if you refund within a certain point of a time, then you might get the refund. But then what if you want to report any software flaw? So then if there is any software flaw, there is a mistake in the software, then who should be reported? So obviously you will try to report the flaw, but then the other person who is the vendor will always try to reject your offer because you do not want to replace. So what several viewpoint exists that we are going to see in the next slide. So when we speak about the redress for software failure, the redress can be based on the vendor's interest or it can be on the user's interest. So let us see first what is the vendor's interest and the redress for the software failure on user's interest. So when we speak about first the vendor's interest, I've given an example. If you've seen here, it is clearly shown that, for example, Microsoft argues that producing one patch for each discovered vulnerability is insufficient. So Microsoft argues that there is some flaw in the software, and every time he cannot release a patch for every discovered vulnerability because it is inefficient both for the vendor and the user. The vendor might prefer to bundle all the patches together into a single service pack. So you release a new service pack. In the service pack, you bundle all the several patches, multiple several patches, or if it's a non-critical vulnerability, to hold the vulnerability till the next version. So that Microsoft would like to provide a control when all the report, when there is subsequent amount of vulnerability assigned. So this can be the vendor's interest. But then the user interest would be that whenever any flaw is there, it needs to be fixed immediately. So for a vendor to fail to provide timely patches to vulnerability of which the vendor is aware, leaves the users with wide open to attacks. Because if there are no patches done, then obviously the user will be left with wide open to attack, of which the user may be unaware. So David Litchfield, if you remember, there is something given in the book also. David Litchfield, who is a security researcher, he has noted that for locating flaws in vendor's program, which is announced in May 2002, that he would no longer automatically wait for the vendor's patch before going public with the vulnerability announcement. That he cannot wait lifetime that till the time the vendor is releasing any patch, he need to keep silent. So Litchfield criticized the approach of holding the fix of several vulnerabilities until enough is accumulated to give a new service pack. He has given a point that if one reporter has found a problem, so too could any number of malicious attackers. Then for a vendor to fail to provide timely patches to vulnerability of which the vendor is aware, leaves the user wide open to attacks of which the user may be unaware. And because of that, Litchfield has given a solution that there is a necessary to push the pressure on the vendor. He announced that he would give vendors only 1 week notice for the vulnerability. Now, in that 1 week, if that vulnerability is not fixed, then he may publicize the vulnerability. And then if he publish the vulnerability, then obviously the details will be available to the entire world, but he will not detail of how to exploit it. But then he will release that there are certain kind of a vulnerability. So when we speak about the user's interest, user cannot wait for a lifetime till the time the vendor or the Microsoft kind of a manufacturer just wait till the time any new update or patches come. So he has said that he would be giving vendors 1 week notice of a vulnerability before publicizing the vulnerability, but not about the details of how to exploit it to the entire world. So this is about the vendor's interest and the user's interest. Sajjad, any doubt? Okay, fine, fine, good. So now going further, let us see something on a responsible vulnerability reporting. Uh, Clearly, the conflicting interests of vendors and user must meet at some compromising position. So Christie and Viswapal have proposed a vulnerability reporting process that meet constraints of timeliness, fair play, and responsibility. They call the user who is reporting any problem as a reporter and the manufacturer as the vendor. So they used two different terms. If you can see, they have used two different terms. The one who the user who is reporting any vulnerability as a reporter and the manufacturer as the vendor. We are also given something called as a coordinator. Coordinator is nothing but a third party, such as any emergency response center, who will play a role when there is a conflict arises between the reporter and the vendor. So basically, the process requires reporter and vendor to do the following whenever they are dealing on the redress for software failures. The vendor, what is the vendor? The manufacturer. The vendor must acknowledge a vulnerability report confidentiality to the reporter. Who is the reporter? A user who is actually suspected a vulnerability is the reporter. A vendor must agree that the vulnerability exists, or if he thinks vulnerability cannot exist, he can argue otherwise. But then a vendor must agree that the vulnerability exists, and he need to work on it. The vendor must inform users of the vulnerability and any available countermeasures that he will take within 30 days, or request even additional time from the reporter as needed. So he need to give the answer to the reporter about that. Yes, there is some vulnerability identified, and within 30 days of the request, or additional time depending on how impactful that vulnerability is, but that needs to be reported to the reporter. After informing the user, the vendor may request from the reporter a 30 days quiet period. Quiet period means it's a time in which uh, uh, the user are supposed to remain quiet. So it is called as a quiet period to allow users time to install patches. So give some time so that a patches can be fixed. Now at the end of the quiet period, the vendor and the reporter should agree upon a date at which time the vulnerability information may be released to the general public. The vendor should credit the reporter with having located the vulnerability. Now vendor should actually go in front of others and tell that this was a vulnerability and that was being located by the reporter. If the vendor does not follow these steps, then the reporter should work with a coordinator to determine a responsible way to publicize the vulnerability. So this is called as responsibility vulnerability writing, and this is done to meet the interests of both the vendors and users, right? That they should come up with some compromising solution. Next and the last redress for software failure is the quality software. Now, when we speak about the quality software, the world does not need any faster patch. But what does the world need? The world needs that there should be a better software with few vulnerabilities after the delivery to the user. It should not happen that some software is released to a user and then it is having a lot of bugs even now and then. So what the world wants, that there should be a fast. It does not want that for the vulnerability there should be any faster patch. But what the world wants is a better software with very few vulnerabilities. So in January 2002, Bill Gates, if you can see, the CEO of Microsoft announced that producing quality software with minimal defects is the highest priority for the Microsoft instead of giving any new functionality. So their main intention is that they will find out or they will try to make a quality software with minimal defect with the highest priority given to the quality software rather than with a new software with the new functionality. So the issue here is not how promptly a vulnerability is patched or how much detail is released with the vulnerability. The penetrators will always find other old flaws or new flaws introduced because of or on the patch. But the issue is the technology, technical, maybe the psychological, social, sociological, or maybe economic. Until we produce consistently solid software, our entire computing infrastructure is seriously at risk. So that needs to be taken into consideration, right? That the quality software is the primary requirement, and until we produce any consistent solid software, the entire computing infrastructure is seriously at risk. So that needs to be taken into consideration. So since we have seen the redress for computer software failures, let us see what does the crime happens and what it comes under the computer crime. So we are going to see details on this thing. So When we speak about computer crime, crime, as we all know, it involves any computers which are an area of the law that is even less clear than the other areas. In this section, what we are going to do is we are going to study computer crime, and we are going to see why new laws are needed to address some of the problems. So, since because of there are certain crimes, what are the different laws that are required to address such kind of a problem? So, we are going to see in case of a computer crime. Okay, so to start discussing on computer crime, let us first see the computer crimes can be categorized or can be organized into certain categories, including murder or including a robbery. So it can be different ways. So crime can be of different types. A crime can be maybe example of somebody does a murder, so that can be one type of crime. Somebody does a robbery, that is can be categorized into another type of a crime. So we do not separate crime into categories for different weapons, such as a gun crime or maybe a knife crime. But we normally separate the crime based on the victim into categories, depending on whether they are people or whether they are objects. So there should be a law regarding a crime which involves computers are less clear. So whatever clause you have, whatever laws you have regarding crime, which is involving computers are less clear. So there are no clear laws that are being made for any computer-based crime. So there should be a new law which need to address all these problems. So let us look at an example to see why this category are not efficient and why we need special law related to computer as subject and object of a crime. So first one, which you can see is the rules of a property. So, rules of a property means when unauthorized access to a computing system is a crime, right? So, because unauthorized access to a computing system is possible, it is again a crime. So, for example, if a stranger enters your garden and he walks around, let's take an example. There is a stranger who is entering your garden and he is walking in your garden. What will do? How you will feel? Even if he is not touching anything, even if nothing is touched or if nothing is damaged, but still you can the act is considered trespassing. However, because access by computer does not involve a physical object, not all courts punish it as a serious crime. Now, if somebody does it physically, so let's take an example. If somebody comes to your garden and he roams around your garden, if a stranger enters your garden, it is a crime because nobody is allowed to enter into your premises. But then if something accesses your computer, it is not a physical object. And so not all courts punish it as a serious crime. So here we require the use of a cyber computer crime. Here we require a new law that needs to be addressed for such kind of a problem. Okay. Second problem when considering the computer crime is the rules of evidence. Now when we say about an evidence, uh, evidence is something proof that says that certain crime has occurred. Now, computer printouts have been used as evidence in many successful prosecutions. So, probably any computer crime is done, computer printouts have been used. Frequently used are the computer records generated in the ordinary course of action, such as the log file, such as the system model file. Under the rules of evidence, court prefer an original source document to a copy, under the assumption that the copy may be inaccurate or may have been modified in the copying process. So the biggest difficulty when we speak about the computer-based evidence in court is able to demonstrate the authenticity of the evidence, right? It is the biggest challenge. So whenever we use the computer technology or when we use computer-based evidence and we present it into a court, the court always have a question that whether the copy is an accurate one or it has not been modified, and because that is actually biggest concern to demonstrate the authenticity of the evidence. Law enforcement officials operate under a chain of custody requirement. So from a moment a piece of evidence is taken until it is presented in a court, they track clearly and completely the order and identifies of the people who had personally custody of that object. So detail about the entire thing we are going to cover probably in the sixth module when we are going to see it in a digital forensics. But then again, chain of custody plays a very important role whenever we speak on the rules of an evidence, in which right from who has an access to the evidence, because there are chances that if the evidence is handled in multiple people, then it may be tempered and then it cannot be presented in the law of court, right? So the reason for the chain of custody is to ensure that nobody has the opportunity to alter the evidence in any way before it is presented in the court. So with computer-based evidence, it can be difficult to establish a chain of custody. If a crime occurred on Monday and still it is not discovered till Wednesday, who can verify that the log file was not altered? There are possibilities that someone might switch to a system and he might modify the log file. In fact, it probably was altered many times as different process generated log entries. So the issue is to demonstrate that the log entry, say on Monday, does in fact correspond to the event that took place at that time on Monday, and not some attempt on Thursday to plant a false clue along the crime that took place. So that is against the biggest challenge whenever whenever the evidence is concerned. Because whenever the evidence is concerned and it's presented in the law of court, then that evidence needs to have an authenticity, and it should have a proper chain of custody, saying that it is only handed over to minimal person, and there is no any method of altering the evidence in any way before it is presented to the law of court. Okay. So as soon as the rule of evidence is concerned, now what are the threats? So there are several threats that are always there to integrity and confidentiality. Now these are the terminology that you have already seen. The integrity and secrecy of the data are issues in many court cases, right? So Parker and Nycom, they have described a case in which the trespasser gained remote access to a computing system. The computing system contained confidential records about the people, and the integrity of the data was important. For example, disclosing the grades or disclosing any financial information without permission is a crime. So that can be a threat to integrity. If somebody logs into the system, or if somebody logs into a machine, and that can again be a crime, because disclosing the grades or financial information without permission is a crime. So there is a threat to the integrity and confidentiality of the data. Second is the value of a data. How can you value a data? So in another computer crime, a person was found guilty of having stolen an amount of data from a computer data bank. Now this is a real example. A person was actually found guilty of having stolen an amount of data for a computer. A person was found guilty because he has stolen a lot of data from a computer. However, the court determined that value of the data was just the cost of a paper on which it was printed, which was only a few dollars. Because of that valuation, the crime was classified as it was very small, and it was then considered a minor crime. Fortunately, the court has since determined that information and all the other intangibles can have significant value. The concept of what we value and how we determine its value is key to understand the problem with computer-based law, because there can be certain information which can be valuable, but then at the end it cannot depict that, right? So there is the value of a data. So concept of value and how we determine its value is a key to computer-based law. In most economy, paper money is accepted as a valuable commodity, even if the paper on which it is printed takes less money, even it takes only a few cents, or if it takes only few rupees, or if it takes few paisa for printing a note. Paper money is accepted, but still a paper money is considered a valuable commodity. Cash is easy to value. A dollar bill is worth $1, but consider the way to determine the value of the company's asset. Usually, the valuation reflects the amount of money a person or organization is willing to pay for it. For example, the asset of a credit bureau, maybe a CIBIL score, or its file, right? So bank and insurance company are willing to pay $20 or even more for a credit report, even though the paper itself is worth less a dollar, right? So every information, depending on what information, has a value. For the credit bureau, the credit CIBIL score is very important, right? So that has a value. Banks and insurance company always are ready to pay a number of amount for a credit report, even though it's a paper itself, which is, it might worth less than a dollar. So for a credit bureau, the amount a willing customer will pay for a report is a fair estimate of the report's value. So this estimate is called as the market value of the report. However, the credit bureau or any other company might have an asset that are not sold but are valuable to the company's assets, right? For example, I can again tell you, if there is a confidential list of a data, or if there is a confidential list of a client, has no market value, but then the list is very essential, right? If you see what you have a set of database of list of clients. So list of clients on a paper might think that it's of no value, but then its value is apparent because you can get a lot of business out of it. So its value is apparent only when and there are certain information which value is only been known when that loss is suffered, such as when the secret information is made available to the competitor. So as we have seen in case of trade secret, if you have a trade secret and if you know the how a soft drink of a Coca-Cola is being prepared, now initially that has no value, but then if that secret information is reached to a competitor, then you will come to know the value of that data. So over the time, the legal system will find the way to place the value of a data to value of the data which is there on the system. So value of a data should always be considered and which needs to be taken into consideration whenever a law is to be made. Clear? Any doubts so far? Okay, thanks Sajjad. Yeah. Now let us see why computer crime is hard to define. Now again, question comes why computer crime is hard to define. Now, it is clear that the legal community has not accommodated advance in the computer as rapidly as the rest of the society. As we have seen, there are legal community have not accommodated any advance in the computing as rapidly as the rest of the society. It means some people in the legal process do not understand the computer and the computing. And because people in the legal process do not understand, because they are not the technical people, or people who made the legal law, or the people who made the legal process do not understand the computers and the computing, and so crime involving computers are not always treated properly. Creating and changing law are slow process intended to involve substantial thought about the effect of proposed changes. This deliberate process is very much out of pace with the technology that is programming very fast, right? So as we know that there are the technology which are rapidly changing, and the way this is being added in the law is very slow. That's a slow process. So both are not matching. It has to be synced. If the technology is increasing, there needs to be a proper law to maintain. So adding to the problem of a rapidly changing technology, a computer can perform many roles in a crime. A particular computer can be a subject, a computer can be an object, or it can also be a medium of a crime. A computer can be attacked, or a computer can be used to attack, or a computer can be used as a means to commit a crime. So computer crime must address all of these events, right? So that is the reason a computer crime is actually hard to define, because some people in the legal process do not understand the computers and they do not understand the technology, and so crime involving computers are not always treated properly, because the person who actually legal process that takes place, they're not aware of about the various kind of a crime that occurs when a computer is concerned. So crime that involves computers do not always treated properly, right? That is the reason the computer crime is hard to define. Second question, why computer crime is hard to prosecute? Now, even everyone acknowledges that the computer crime has been committed. Everyone knows that nowadays computer crime is possible. Computer crime is committed. Computer crime is hard to prosecute. It means computer crime is hard to bring it to the court for following reason. First one, lack of understanding. uh, Three reasons why the computer crime is hard to prosecute or computer crime is difficult to bring it to the court. There are three reasons. There are more reasons also. We are going to see three reasons here. First one, the lack of understanding, lack of physical evidence, and the lack of recognition of assets. So first one is the lack of understanding. Uh, you might see the courts, the lawyers, and even the police agents or even the judges do not understand computers. They are people from law. They are not the people from an engineering or from technology background. So they people do not understand the computers. And many judges begin their practicing the law before the invention of the computers. Now, if you go and check who the judges are, probably in a high court, Supreme Court, or probably in the law of court, if you go and check, they are the people who are practicing the law before the invention of the computers. So, because if they are there before the invention of the computers, they really do not understand the computers, and most might have never used the computers. Fortunately, computer literacy in the court is improving nowadays. In judges, in the lawyers, and the police officers now use the computers in the daily activities. But then there are chances that because of lack of understanding, it is hard to bring it to the court, because people like court, lawyers, police agent and judges do not understand. Second is lack of physical evidence. Now police and court have for years depended on the evidence. If you have seen, there are, when we speak about the computer crime, there is no physical evidence. Whenever there is a computer crime happening, there is no person who goes and does a physical crime. And so far, in so many years, the court, the police, and even the judges and all the cases, they normally are dependent on tangible evidence. It means maybe certain objects or certain fingerprints. So it might be possible that they might consider all the cases very small because they cannot understand it, and because of lack of physical evidence, they may not consider it as a crime. Okay, so with many computer crime, there simply are no fingerprints and there are no physical clue of any sort. So because of lack of physical evidence, that can be hard to bring it to the court. Third is lack of recognition of asset. We know that we know what cash is or the diamonds are as the security, but are 20 invisible magnetic spots really equivalent to $1 million? Is computer time an asset? Is computer time an asset? What is the value of a stolen computer time is if this system would have been idle during the time of a theft? So is the computer time an asset? So there is a lack of recognition of an asset, that the computer asset is also a value that needs to be taken into consideration. Okay. Next one, lack of political impact. Solving any obtaining lack of any political impact. So solving and obtaining a conviction for a murder or a robbery is popular, and so it gets high priority. Solving and obtaining a conviction for the high-tech crime is not that important because it involves obvious less attention because of a high-tech crime. There are a lot of political impact. However, as computers becomes more and more pervasive, the visibility and impact of the computer crime will actually increase. So there are lack of political impact. There are less attention given to the high-tech crime. Next one is the complexity of the case. Basic crime that everyone understands, such as murder, kidnapping, or maybe an auto theft, can be easy to prosecute or can be easy to bring it to the court. But then a money laundering case or maybe a tax fraud case may be more difficult to be present to the court because a person have a hard time following a trail. But the hardest time to present may have a high-tech crime. For example, when we say a complexity of a case, when we say, for example, a root access by a buffer overflow attack, in which the memory was overwritten by some other instructor, which allowed the attacker to copy and execute code and then delete the code, will not be understood by the court, right? And the last case why computer crime is hard to prosecute is because of the age of defendant. Now, many computer crimes are committed by juveniles, right? So society understands immaturity and disregards even very serious crime because they do not understand the impact of the actions. Even when there is a clear evidence of a crime, the victim may not want to prosecute because of possible negative publicity. Bank, insurance company, and all the firms also find that it is very difficult to prosecute. That is the reason computer crime is hard to prosecute, and there are, because of several all the reasons that we have discussed, it is becoming very difficult to prosecute. Okay. Now, since we have seen why computer crime is hard to prosecute, let us see why computer criminals are hard to catch. Very important. You might be knowing there are the computer criminals who does lot of crime. They are very difficult to catch. Why? Because first, computer crime is a multinational activity. What is the meaning of that? Computer crime is a multinational activity. It means the activity can happen on a national level or can be an international level. There are no any international law on the computer crime. Even though the major nations nowadays cooperate very effectively on tracking the computer criminal, but a smart attacker will always bound an attack through many places. So if there's a smart attacker, he will bounce an attack through many places, too difficult to understand the trail. Right? For example, the attacker may go from A to B and then from B to C. So for example, if any crime is been done by an attacker and he is using multiple servers, server A to B and then server to B to C, the law enforcement investigator will first need to give a search warrant to find out what did data exist in server A. Then from server A, how did data went to server B and C. Even after obtaining the search warrant, the investigator will have to have the administrator rights and the search warrant to obtain the information. So in this time, the investigator asks for and gets the permission for the search warrants. Till that time, the attacker might have a chance that he might erase all the evidences. So that is the reason computer criminals are always hard to catch, because it's a multinational activity and the attacker might bounce it to multiple servers. It will take a lot of time for investigating. Until the time investigation gets complete, there are chances that the attacker will carefully erase all the evidence and he will never be caught. So that is the reason the computer criminals are hard to catch. Clear? So there are certain things in this module will just by reading you yourself will understand the several reasons and what are the several laws needs to be taken into consideration when we are dealing with this thing. Clear this much? Okay, Sajjad, yeah, good. Last thing, why computer crime does not address. Now, as we have seen earlier, there is the information value. So value presents a similar problem. So as we have seen in certain cases, the courts have trouble separating the value of an object. A court may not understand the value of an information. Court may have a problem in identifying the actual value of an object, because if you bring some evidence, if you bring a computer evidence, the court might think that it is just a sheet of paper which is written something on it, and he will not understand the importance of that information. So court are still striving to determine the fair value of the computer objects. So for example, the cost of, if you see a blank CD is minimum, but then if you write, if you have a data on it, it may have thousands of hours of data gathering and machine time to produce the data on the disk. So court are still striving to determine the value of a computer object. So for the court, they might think that it is just a CD, but they will not realize the data that is present on the CD and the value it has. The court is still striving to determine the fair value of the computer object. Both the value of a person's privacy and the value of a person's confidentiality are even less settled, and because of that, computer crime does not address. So going further, we'll see how ethics and individual morality takes over when the law stops. At certain point of time, there are some limitations with the legal issues. So going further, probably in the next lecture, that is tomorrow, we'll take the last part of module number 5, that is based on ethical issues. That what will happen if there are some when the law stops. So at certain point, you cannot have a law that will address all the problems. So how ethical solution, or what are the ethical issues do we have in the computer security, and how certain problems can be solved with the help of ethically. So that we would be the last part. We would be taking it tomorrow, and then we will be starting with the last module, that is module number 6, which will speak about the digital forensics. So I hope you have enjoyed today's lecture. We'll again meet up tomorrow. Well, we'll continue the other part on advanced system security and digital forensics. All of you are requested to kindly write your details in the chat box, UIN number, name, and the roll number, and you can resend it out if you have. So tomorrow we are going to speak much on an ethical issues, and then we are going to proceed it further. So I'll just give you some introduction on an ethical issues, and then in detail we are going to see tomorrow. So ethical issues, when we say occur when a given decision or when a given scenario or a given activity creates a conflict within a society's moral principle. At that time, ethical issue comes into consideration. I repeat again, ethical issues occur when a given decision or if there are scenario or any activity that creates a conflict within a society's moral principle. At that time, we consider an ethical issue. So these conflicts are sometimes legal dangerous since some of the alternatives to solve the issue might breach a law. So in such case, issue might not have a legal consequences, but it might generate a negative reaction from third parties, right? So we are going to see how we can have certain ethical issues to deal such kind of a problem, in which the activities, the decision are taken by taking into consideration the society's moral principles. So what the details about everything about the same that we are going to proceed it tomorrow. So I hope you have enjoyed today's session. We'll end the lecture here. We shall meet up again tomorrow at 12 p.m. where we'll discuss about advanced system security and digital forensics. Thank you, everyone. You can update your details in the chat box, UIN number and name and the roll number if you have not done.